Hey guys. Hello. Thanks for coming, seriously. Um yeah. Without much description, you guys trusted the poster and stuff, so thank you for coming. Some of you are familiar, some of you are not, so today is going to be a bit of an introduction to the lab. So, welcome to the first version of Anti-Space. I am Nehirai, researcher, designer, and founder of Slow and Unreal Research Lab. With me is Murathan Biliktu, over there, interdisciplinary designer and collaborator at SURL. So let me introduce you guys to Slow and Unreal Research Lab, also known as SURL. It is an Unreal institution that creates the space for in-depth explorations of the term real world. It is a reminder that the real world is also a design. As URL asked the question, should designers even design for the real world? Our first dossier of research has been Unreal Space. We're going to be getting into this concept today. But SURL is many things. This summer, SURL is starting to establish an experimental live streaming practice, SURL TV, and including today, we're conducting practice-based research on experimental television and hybrid spatiality. This event is to be digitized later. We're not live currently, but it is to be digitized later. So you are currently submerged in the infrastructure of a hybrid event. And so bear with us if things glitch and don't work. When the infrastructure is not working, that is the moment you realize that the infrastructure is there. So just exist in this hybrid state with us and bear with us if things glitch for a second. And physically, we're situated here at Maisel Studios, in which the exhibition showroom is happening. So if your eye wanders and you want to check out the surrounding work, that's okay. No one's going to get offended. It's a part of the hybrid condition. So that is okay. And before I go in any further, I want to point you guys to the tool Muratan developed that enables you to make live changes to the space the green screen takes me to. Feel free to tinker with this during the talk. You can access it through the QR code on the screen. And again, glitches may occur, but do that now, because the QR code is going to be there for the rest of the talk. Okay, so let's start with something familiar. Before I get into some theory stuff, let's start with something familiar, real world space. So think about the most real world space you can imagine, like a bank, maybe a condo, an office building, etc. In his text, Production of Space, Lefebvre explains that 20th century capitalist production also applies to space as well as commodities. Since the Industrial Revolution, and even more so now with AI in the workforce, the demand for human labor to produce goods has decreased, and we were able to reach a state of mass consumerism, where scarcity only exists if it's artificially produced. And today, we're not as much scarce of goods as we are of space. Perhaps the most relatable example of this is how real estate is getting more expensive and tinier, despite all the vacant units in Toronto or any metropole for that matter. And the production and access to real-world spaces are mediated by social class, which means the capitalist city always has too much space for the rich and too little for the poor. The construction of the real-world notion is deeply entangled with institutional and financial power. In other words, real-world space only serves a minority. So let's talk about some real-world in terms of design. The set phrase real world is routinely deployed in design education and professional practice as a kind of disciplinary common sense. An understanding that determines in advance what problems are worth solving, who counts, and what futures are worth considering. The real world naturalizes a certain configuration of space, capital, and social relations. The current approach to design implies that design's job is to serve an existing order, an order that is not neutral or universal. And so, if you're a practitioner, student, or educator in the design world, you can notice that the phrase real world functions as both a rallying cry and a disciplinary fence. It is a modernist spatial ideology that forecloses spatial imagination and produces docile subjects who are programmed not to question it. And it's important to talk about what docile means here. Michel Foucault, in an essay called The Subject and Power, argues that institutions produce us from the inside. They shape what we understand ourselves to be capable of, entitled to, and responsible for in the first place. Like, again, keeping you off a grasp that would be a constraint from the outside. So what Foucault is talking about is a bit closer to the inside of your own head. So power in this sense works by quietly defining the boundaries of what's thinkable, what's visible, and even what's possible to imagine desiring. Nobody tells you don't imagine a building like that, a different kind of building. You just never end up imagining it because the space you moved through your whole life had already made that decision for you. But real world space was not built in a day. It has deep ideological roots. What we now know as real world space, Lefebvre would call abstract space. What this definition points to is the modernist reduction, the rationalization, commodification, and bureaucratic administration of space. Space hasn't always been this way. It is a product of a political imaginary. Ways of envisioning, conceiving, and representing the spaces within which everyday life and capital accumulation are to unfold. And so the production of real-world space is simultaneously the production of a real-world subject. A subject who accepts the given spatial order as natural, necessary, total, and all there is. Power in this sense is exercised through real-world space. It works by, again, defining the boundaries of what you're usually capable of thinking in the first place. An abstract space absorbs its own conditions of production, rendering the historical processes that constructed it invisible, and it just simply presents itself as the real world, there before you even enter it. So that's real world space. What is space, really? For this chapter, the definition of space I'm talking about is a real-world unconventional definition, or unreal space. For Doreen Massey, in her book For Space, space is a living multiplicity. The possibility of the existence of multiplicity in the sense of contemporaneous plurality. Space is not giving in advance. It is the product of relations, trajectories, encounters, and negotiations that are always open-ended and never finally resolved. Very Lefebvrean, as Lefebvre would tell us that space is something that is socially produced. And Massey also tells us that space is inextricably tied to imagination. Its openness is political. Space is always the possibility of something else. So space is what can be conceived, projected, and anticipated. So not really just like four walls or what is physically present. And it is this imaginary forward definition that is what we mean by unreal space. The Unreal Space manifestos that you guys found on your seats explains the points that I've made pretty well so far. All this talk about Unreal Space is something that we've been doing for a while, if you guys are familiar with the lab. And if you're not, you get the gist now. And that is not to say that we are the inventor of Unreal Spaces. That's not the case. For example, People have been using spatial metaphors to talk about the web for a very long time. Think like chat rooms, websites, etc. For example, I've been renovating my desktop every season, transforming a seemingly flat surface into virtually endless landscapes. And now I want to read a quote from Annette Markham. Although computer-mediated social spaces have no literal physical substance, they can be perceived as having dimension, comprising meaningful, structured places where things happen that have genuine consequences. In this frame, the internet is not so much a prosthetic for the senses, but a separate environment where the self can interact, move, travel, and exist. Conceptualized as a space, the internet develops architectures, boundaries, and multiple entry and exit points. So, we now know very well that things that happen online aren't necessarily separated from real life, real world. And I've been talking to someone here a few days ago about this. And we talked about how, in the scarcity of real world spaces for the common folk, the internet has also been serving as a third space. And that is also very true, but let's keep this in the realm of cyberspaces. For example, Unreal Space is commonly used in digital folklore, and it can tell us about the zeitgeist, as digital folklore is often created collectively, simultaneously, and spontaneously. I'm talking about like internet aesthetics for now. Like think vaporwaves, empty malls, speaking to the unkept promises of 80s capitalism, for example, or I don't know if you guys saw the movie Back Rooms, based off the internet folklore, Back Rooms, where in that movie it was the main character's psycho state was expressed architecturally and the absurdity and insanity of the back rooms. Yeah, so now we have talked about these two kinds of spaces, and I want to talk about, for the rest of the talk, about the threshold between them. Obviously, a common threshold in cyberspaces is the screen, and today I'm going to be focusing on a green screen, elephant in the room, so it's time. What happens when a green screen on its own refuses to be space? So, based on the definition we established earlier, in a Lefebvrean sense, it would be easy and wrong to read the green screen on its own simply as a non-space and a failure of space, because Lefebvre, again, would tell us that space is something that is socially produced. And Marc Auger has this idea of non-places, like airports, hotel chains, etc. Places that don't really hold anything. You move through them, but they don't accumulate memory the way your childhood bedroom does, for example. But even non-places are still produced by social practice. You know, people move through them with destinations, with identities, maybe a boarding pass. And green screen asks what happens if you would take that one step further. A space that refuses to hold anything at all, on purpose. So this non-place reading misses the critical potential of the green screen's peculiar ontology. The green screen is a paradoxical spatial device because it is a void and a generator. The green screen voids the ideological content of the real-world space while generating pure potential. Literally any image can be composited in, like insert space here, basically. It overlays infinite potential spatialities onto a fixed site, exposing how the surrounding space is already mediated and constructed. And for a second, I want to make this concrete. I built a version of this. This project was called Anti-Space, based off this research, referring to this room divider next to me. It is a mobile green screen room divider. We brought it directly to institutional facades. For example, here it is in front of a neoclassical manor, columns, symmetry, elevated entrance, the whole thing. The full architectural grammar of power. The kind of building that announces legitimacy the second you look at it. And by the way, these are postcards now, and they are available for purchase at the desk over there. And all profits go to future projects in the lab. Thank you. And let's get back into what a green screen does to space. The best way to pinpoint what the green screen does to space would be through understanding Jean Baudrillard's simulacra and simulations. Baudrillard argues that modernity has progressively been replaced by a regime of simulation. Representations that don't refer to some original anymore, but actually precede and produce their own reference. The map comes before the territory, is how he explained it. The real is manufactured. So what's distinctive about the green screen is that it takes this logic to its limit, manufacturing the real, and then flips it. So walk with me for a second. Baudrillard's simulacrum is a representation that passes for the real, but the green screen on its own refuses representation entirely in order to become it. So the precondition for any simulation whatsoever, on its own, it is 0 degree of representation, pure possibility held open by physical absence. A prof of mine had explained this to me through a black hole analogy, so a quick tangent for anyone who isn't into astrophysics. A black hole doesn't really count as empty space. It's a region where information goes in and doesn't come back out. The green screen kind of works in the same way. It is, in astrophysics terms, the event horizon of representation, the exact point where spatial information gets swallowed. Ordinary space would accumulate memory, but green screen swallows it and erases it. It is anti-mnemonic, anti-phenomenological, anti-social. So, that's what a green screen does to space. Avoid a generator, and to go back to Baudrillard, some sort of pre-simulacrum. A small flat surface that refuses to hold anything, so it can hold anything at all. And thank you for sitting with us in the hybrid state today. You guys really experienced the whole hybrid infrastructure thing. So I want to do some acknowledgements really quick. Folks here at Maisel, namely Diego, Monica, Leona, Blynn, Roberto, Jody. Jody is the person who made this, my neighbor. And more that I probably forgot to name. They've been incredibly resourceful at helping us put this together. I want to thank Murat Khan, of course, for being an awesome collaborator. My former architecture prof, Eric Ney, who was repulsed at the idea of virtual space. He was the prof who would put me through this whole astrophysics rabbit hole. And all of the scholars whose work I read while putting this together. Yes. And that's it. Thank you guys.